Allison. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Unit 3. I am Jay Barth. I'm the Chief Education Officer for the City of Little Rock and a retired professor of American politics at Hendrix College. I'll let my other judges introduce themselves. Rita?
Allison? Okay. I'm Rita McCannon. I'm a lawyer in Huntsville, Alabama. I'm excited to hear from you guys. I'm particularly excited to see your banner. We don't get to see very many of those on Zoom, and I'm looking really forward to hearing from you.
Indeed. Hello, everybody. My name is Thomas Mackey. I'm in the History Department at the University of Louisville and the Brandeis School of Law at the University of Louisville.
So we'll let you all introduce yourselves.
Hi, my name is Colette Seeger. Hi, I'm Autumn Meadows.
Hi, I'm Andrew Sword, and our teacher is Mr. Dickman.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much. Your Unit 3 question is the first question. Quote, I do not think the United States would come to an end if we lost our power to declare an act of Congress void. I do think the Union would be imperiled if we could not make the declaration as to the laws of the several states. End quote. What impact has judicial review had on federalism? Next, is judicial review a counter-majoritarian practice? Please support your position. Finally, what limits, if any, would you place on the practice of judicial review? Take it away.
Mr. Chairman, as Justice Holmes noted, the importance of judicial review in checking the constitutionality of state laws, it is equally important to note that it has provided needed checks on the federal power as well. Judicial review has played a key role in establishing the relationship between the national and state governments, as seen in the landmark 1819 Macaulay v. Maryland decision, in which the Supreme Court asserted the supremacy of the national government over the states by allowing the U.S. government to create a national bank under the necessary and proper clause under Article 1, Section 8 of the United States Constitution. This can further be seen in Gibbons v. Ogden, when the Supreme Court ruled that only the national government could regulate interstate commerce. Additionally, the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment allowed for the national government to extend and enforce portions of the Bill of Rights to protect citizens from states infringing upon their rights, as seen in the 1925 Gitlow v. New York decision, which incorporated the right to free speech. Finally, judicial review has been used to limit the power of the national government, as seen in the 1990 Lopez v. United States decision, in which the Supreme Court declared that Congress had overstepped its power to regulate states under the Commerce Clause with the Gun-Free School Zone law.
Mr. Chairman, judicial review is a counter-majoritarian practice to the extent that it protects the supremacy of the Constitution over actions taken by democratically elected majorities, as established in the 1803 Marbury v. Madison decision, which ruled that portions of the Judiciary Act of 1789 were unconstitutional. While the Marbury v. Madison decision asserted constitutional supremacy over majority rule, judicial review has also prevented tyranny of the majority by providing a bulwark against public opinion and the popular passions of the day. This has been seen when the Supreme Court ruled separate but equal laws and policies passed by Southern legislatures were unconstitutional in the 1954 Brown v. Board of Education decision. More recently, the Supreme Court reflected that, at times, it is the last bastion for minority rights by holding Congress accountable for following the Constitution by ruling the 1996 Defense of Marriage Act unconstitutional in the 2015 decisions in Obergefell v. Hodges. While the U.S. prides itself on majority rule, it is important to note that judicial review is necessary because without it, there wouldn't be a way to hold the government accountable for its own rules.
Mr. Chairman, while the current limits on judicial review, such as the exceptions clause, requiring a case to be ripe, and considering precedents have worked well, additional limits, such as establishing a separate court or requiring a supermajority on issues of constitutionality, should be considered. Since the assertion of judicial review by Chief Justice John Marshall in the 1803 Marbury v. Madison decision, its constitutional limitations have included the existence of a clear constitutional argument, as stated in Article 3, Section 1, and the exceptions clause in Section 2. In addition, the courts have applied the principles of ripeness and precedence to require the courts to follow established legal principles. As the use of judicial review has increased and the partisan struggle to control the ideological makeup of the court has intensified, changes such as requiring a supermajority on judicial review decisions or creating a court to deal specifically with issues of constitutionality should be considered. Rather than focusing on clear issues of constitutionality, as Justice Marshall had argued, 5 to 4 decisions have typically fluctuated between 18 and 21% since 1980, according to the Brookings Institute. And while Alexander Hamilton touted the importance of judicial independence in Federalist 78, recent history has shown that both parties are willing to spend political capital to gain an ideological advantage in the courts. We are now ready for your follow-ups.
Fantastic. Thank you. Great job. I'm going to go back to kind of the opening section. And I would love y'all to talk a little bit more about your understanding of incorporation and where the court is on what should and what sections of the Bill of Rights should and should not be incorporated.
Mr. Chairman, I believe there are many individual liberties that the Bill of Rights and the Supreme Court believes that the Bill of Rights should extend. As seen in Gill versus New York, we see, those opening statements with the right to free speech, the right to freedom of the press, the right to assembly. Those kinds of rights should be expanded upon because those are rights that states really cannot defy just because they are simple human rights and commonly considered since the beginning of politics that those were just natural rights that a lot of humans were born with. On top of that, you have a lot of individual liberties that have continued and have been enforced as Dwight Eisenhower used the military to enforce civil rights like unsegregating schools. So everybody has the right to education, for example. There are just certain rights that have been enforced in amendments that the government and the Supreme Court are willing to even use the military to enforce.
Thank you.
That's interesting. You allege that education is a right. I thought education was a state function overwhelmingly, and that it was a privilege and not a right. So could you help me clarify what you understand to be privileges versus rights?
I believe a privilege would be something more considering maybe the quality of your education or the place you go, having the choices of what school to go to, private versus public schools. But you see that you can receive federal punishment for not sending your children to school. There have been so many court cases where establishing that religion cannot be at schools and that race cannot divide children from going to school. So you see that education is a right in the fact that they have expanded upon how what sort of practices can be education. If it wasn't a right, they wouldn't really have the ability, the national government wouldn't have the ability to expand upon that, as the Supreme Court would enact that is a state's ability. As I mentioned, that the Supreme Court acts as a balance between the national and the state government. So if the Supreme Court believed that education wasn't a right, they would not have allowed the national government to expand upon it so many times.
And going off of that, I would like to disagree with what my colleague says. I think that education is more of a privilege than a right, and I think that's seen with the Supreme Court ruling in the San Antonio Independent School District versus Rodriguez court case, where they did not find that there is any inherent right to education in the Constitution.
Let me bring you back to your presentation, especially near the end there, where you seem to be hesitant or uncomfortable with judicial independence. Help me understand whether you think judicial independence is a good thing or a bad thing, and take a position and defend it.
Mr. Chairman, I would say that judicial independence is a very good thing. I think that's what keeps the established respect of the Supreme Court and its decisions from the people. You notice there's usually, while there could be disagreement and rising tensions over the way high-profile Supreme Court cases go, I don't think you usually see people threatening wars or threatening serious action because they have a respect. And I think that is due to the judicial independence, because they're not partisan and they hold court in good behavior. So it's reasonable to assume that judicial independence would be a good function.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to agree with my colleague that judicial independence is a very good thing for our country. Although some could argue that it might be beneficial for the Supreme Court to make rulings on the likeness of the people at the time, I believe that following the Constitution, what the people want at the time is always going to change. And so following the Constitution and not having that partisanship is very important.
Rita?
Let me change gears just a little bit and ask you if I know you recall in the news last year of Justice Ginsburg passing away at the age of 83, and I wonder whether replacing a single seat on the Supreme Court can have a major effect, a historically changing effect on the Supreme Court, to change from one justice to another when one goes off and another is appointed. Can that have a historical effect on the entire makeup of the court?
Madam Chairman, it can have a historical effect on the court, as the Supreme Court justices don't really say that they're a part of a party. They do say that their ideals are more conservative or more liberal, which gives us an idea of how they may rule. So we lost a liberal defining judge, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, to replace with the conservative judge, Justice Amy Coney Barrett. And so that could have an effect on the rulings going up, especially now that we have a Democratic president and having a conservative dominated Supreme Court. It could see that President Biden could have some struggles enforcing and getting his bills to go through and not being ruled unconstitutional or being ruled problematic.
You talked about some of the potential reforms that have been discussed and where y'all stood on them. One other reform that has been discussed is to place term limits on what are now lifetime appointments to the Supreme Court. Could you all talk about the pros and the cons of that and where you come down on that potential reform?
Sure. I think one of the obvious pros that is touted right now is that it would almost make sense to expand the Supreme Court to 13 to match the district courts, and there's a precedence of that in the past where they've expanded the Supreme Court. But I think some of the obvious drawbacks that come in with that is who's to say that presidents down the line would not expand it further. And I think that would tarnish the reputation of the Supreme Court and its rulings when they just keep getting expanded because there's no real rules in place about how that should be done.
Anyone else?
Expanding upon, I believe you mentioned term limits. I don't believe that term limits should be in place as an additional limit on the courts, just seeming that the justices who are appointed have a great deal of experience and only gain more experience with the Constitution. And as I mentioned before in one of my responses, I believe that the justices' commitment to the Constitution is more important than their commitment to the people. So I don't believe that term limits and bringing in new justices would be as beneficial as it could be argued.
Thank you.
I think that's about right. Right on time. Nicely done, folks.
All right. Y'all can relax.
Yeah, that's right. Take a breath. It's okay. Look, first off, these are tough, big issues. Judicial review and its limits and meaning, federalism and this balance between state and federal power, counter-majoritarianism. These are issues that states are dealing with, the Congress deals with, federal judges deal with, the Supreme Court justices deal with. So, of course, we ask high school students to explain it to us. So the fact that you struggled a little bit is perfectly good and perfectly natural because that's just the nature of these big issues that you've got. I think you did a good job of trying to come to grips with these big issues. I still want to know a little bit more about accountability and how does the Supreme Court and in what manner hold themselves accountable, not just Congress or the states. And that sometimes I wish I'm a prof. I always want more. I would have liked something a little bit more in depth in your arguments and responses. But overall, I thought you did a nice job on a really tough question. Well done, people.
I feel exactly the same way. I agree with him about more in depth, but the more I looked at my notes, I realized you limited the number of cases and then you explained to us what you wanted to say about them. And I just complained to the group before, you had too many cases, you didn't explain any of them. I guess I need to get happy, don't I? I thought you did an outstanding job, and you're the first group I've ever seen to appear on one camera, and it's very effective. I really, really liked seeing, because I can see each one of you and I can see you guys working together. And you know what I like? I like that you didn't agree. I like that you said that term limits would be good. And then at the other end of the table, term limits are not necessary. I thought that was fine. Thank goodness we have some disagreement and y'all can sit at the table with each other. That's not happening in Congress.
Totally agree with my colleagues in terms of y'all's teamwork, but you're avoiding groupthink. I think, these are, as Tom said, these are really complicated issues, and there should not be one answer, because there hadn't been one answer for well over 200 years. So these are complicated issues, and I think y'all clearly were very well prepared and know your stuff. Obviously there were a couple of little miscues here and there, but you're operating under pressure, and we know that's going to happen. We all do it in life, and the benefits, the attributes of y'all's work today was certainly outweighed the challenges that you had.
Yeah. Well, nicely done, folks.
All right.
Good.
Good luck with
Congratulations.
the rest of the competition, and have a great day.
Thank
Okay.
you.
You bet.